Hi folks. Well, I promised to show you a templated course page in Moodle, and I am ready to do that. So first of all, let me explain the advantages to a templated course page. I've been working with distance education and online now for over 10 years. And the one thing that I've learned that seems to be pretty consistent is that students appreciate predictability. They also appreciate linearity, meaning they like to know what they need to do first and then what they need to do second and third and so on and so forth. It's easier to skip around and explain things in a classroom setting because you've got that one-on-one interaction where you can see if a student is confused and you can say, what are you confused about? Or the student can ask you for clarification. It's not quite that simple in an online setting, especially an asynchronous online setting, which most of our courses are. So with that in mind, let's take a look at one potential template that we have been using in the past, and it seems to be fairly successful, especially for our nursing program, which has been using it for about 1.5 years now. So every course has an introduction. It's in a face-to-face setting. It's where you, the instructor, either look up from your desk once all your students assemble in the room, or you stand in the doorway and greet them as they enter. One way or the other, though, you make that initial personal connection. That's not so easy to do in an online course. If an online course, you as the instructor don't make an effort to bond with your students, and basically it's a correspondence course. It's no different than what it used to be like in the 1950s. What we're trying to do in distance education is to capitalize on the advantages of an electronic interface and then minimize the disadvantages. One way of doing that is to introduce yourself using a video. And there's lots of different ways we can accomplish this. We actually installed a one-button studio up here at Plattsburgh, and you're more than welcome to come up and use it. If you're willing to make the drive, I'm willing to bend over backwards to be here when you can, and to help you record the video, run the teleprompter for you. I will even help you edit the video. But the point is that you're going to create that bond with your students quicker if you can actually allow them to see you, to see your personality, to watch you in action. So in the template design here, we start at the top of the page with Welcome to Teaching and Learning Student Assessment. This is actually, I took one of your existing pages and used it as a prototype here so you could see it with actual content in it. And that first module is where you put all the information that you would generally go over with your students in the first day of class. Now, your introduction doesn't have to be super long. Usually what works well is to introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background to give yourself some credibility in the field you're teaching, and then you don't necessarily have to repeat all the content that the students would find in the syllabus. You don't have to repeat your contact information, discussion guidelines, all of that sort of thing, if you have it itemized on the page below. But you will want to explain the importance of having the student go through that, because I know we've all experienced the student who raises his hand and asks us a question that they would have known the answer to had they only read the syllabus. So it's a good place for you to reinforce that sort of thing. It's also a good place for you to reinforce any other general information that you might have about the course. A lot of students come to these online courses thinking they're going to be simple, and this is a good point or a good place to make sure they understand that online courses are not easier than face-to-face courses, but you're there to help them through it. You have to be kind of a cheerleader at times with this. The way this works is you would just click on the icon and it would take you to a separate Moodle page within your course that will have the video embedded, and then underneath that video would be a text version of of your script. That's important to make sure that you're complying with Americans with Disabilities Act. And I not only encourage, I guess I can only encourage, but I strongly encourage that you write a script first and then you use that script when you're making your video. And if you come up here to do it, we have a teleprompter, and everybody that I've worked with so far does one practice run with the teleprompter, and they relax right into the process, and boom, they've got it. And the advantage to that, of course, is that when you finish, you've got the script that you can use as the transcript and be ADA compliant with your video. And underneath that, you're going to want to put all the stuff that you would normally put or give students on that first day of class. So you'll notice that there are two forums underneath the handouts. Let's call that information handouts. But under there, you'll see that in this template we have two forums. Now, the news forum is a default forum. You get that whenever you create a new course. The way the news forum works, in case you don't already know, is that you can post messages and announcements here. Students can't reply to them. But the nice thing about the news forum is that every student is automatically subscribed to it. So if you have an announcement to make, you put it there, and students will get it through their email, and they'll see it when they come to the Moodle page. I noticed that in this particular course that I built this prototype from, the instructor had used labels within the individual weeks to make announcements. And that works too, but in an online setting, this actually works better because it's coupled with their email. So you've got two opportunities for students to actually see your announcement. With that in mind, if your students do have questions in an online course, it's nice to give them a venue to ask those questions. Now, of course, back in your video introduction, which you also have a link to the transcript, I'm sure you're telling your students that they should feel free to contact you between the hours of this and that if you're an office hours kind of professor, or you might be telling them to send you an email anytime and you promise to get back to them within a certain number of hours. That's also a best practice. But if the students have questions that other students would benefit from hearing the answers, it's nice if they have a place to post those questions. And that way you only have to answer them once, because chances are if one student is asking it, a couple other students are thinking it. You can also use this area as a place for students to post relevant articles and resources that they think might be of interest to the class. It's up to you. It's certainly optional, but it is considered best practice in the industry. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out to you is that if you look at the links, there's actually a description for each one of these that explains what it is and why it's there. You could do that with everything you post. You could, for instance, under the course syllabus, you could, stress the importance of reading the entire syllabus. You can explain why you're posting these things, whatever you want to do. But note that the more text you put on the page, the more students are going to have to scroll through it to get to what they really need once they've read it. Now, what I do in this scenario, if you were to take my 5-week online workshop for online instructors, I do have quite a bit of explanation at the top for each item, especially things that reoccur from one week to the next. And what I do is after the first week, when I know everybody's been to the site and they're all interacting and everything, I go in and I turn those descriptions off, and you'll learn how to do that later on. But then the introduction just becomes a very short section of links, and students can refer back to that stuff if they want, but more likely than not, they're going to go right to the next week. Now, that brings up another issue, and that is scrolling, especially if you're teaching a 15-week course. When you get to week 14, scrolling can be a nightmare for students. Some instructors think they're taking care of that by hiding past modules in the course. The problem with that is that students no longer have access to that material after the fact. And one of the strengths of having a Moodle page for the course is for students to be able to review content that they originally went over weeks before. So here's a solution that I have set up with this template, and it works pretty well. I use this in my 5-week online course for faculty, and most of them tell me that they like it and they're going to use it when they design their courses. So let's scroll down to the actual course content and you'll see what I mean. I know your course is 15 weeks, but I just created 5 modules to give you the idea of how things would work. So it's topic 1, and all I need to do as a student is click, and you'll see that once I do that, that section becomes visible. And under that section I have navigation to either move on to the next session, or I can actually jump to any of the others. Okay, so that's helpful if you're in week 5 and you want to refer back to something in week 2. You don't have to click the back arrow and work through every one of them. You can just go directly to week 2. So let's take a look at what we have in each week. You'll see a couple highlighted lines, and this isn't for students, this is just a note to you as part of the template. Optimally, I would suggest that you create a video introduction for each unit, each topic, each week, however you lay out the course. And that can be a little time consuming. I'm doing it right now for a course I'm teaching, and it's time consuming. I usually write what I want to say over the weekend, and then I post it when the new week begins. And I do that because what I discovered was that depending on how students work through a particular unit, I might want to actually make some general comments on that when I do the video for the next unit. So with that in mind, it's really better, for me anyway, it's better to do those recordings as I need them. Now, there's no reason you have to do video. There are applications that will allow you to do just a sound file and post that. But whatever you do, you're going to want to have a transcript as well to make it ADA compliant. So you might just want to post the transcript and not bother to record it at all. That's up to you. And you don't have to do the same thing every week. Maybe there are a couple weeks where you've really got something important to talk about, like the capstone project, and you want to do a video for that. But other weeks you just want to give them an overview. But the point is, having a student go to a section and just seeing this is linearly, I guess that's a word. Students can look at this and say, well, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to read this material, and I need to read it in this order because my professor put it in this order. And then once I do that, I guess I have to do this assignment. And thankfully, the instructor has included very specific instructions and a due date, so I know exactly what I'm doing there. And then finally, I need to discuss what I've done this week with students, with my fellow students. That's great. Okay, but as the professor, you're probably going to want to add a little more narrative to that. What do they need to pay attention in all those reading assignments? How do they tie together? Why did you put them in the order that you put them in? Or did you? Maybe you just put them alphabetically and it really doesn't matter what order they read them in. Whatever the reason is, students would appreciate it if you gave them some sort of a narrative. And so I always include that narrative at the beginning of that module, that topic, that week, however you've worked out your course. Okay, so you'll also notice that we have some headings here. Reading and other resources. This particular course has plenty of reading, not so much in the way of videos or other interactive activities. And the students do appreciate a little bit of variety with things. So you can add variety by finding relevant YouTube videos, websites that might have some interactive activities. And we can help you find those. Our librarians can also help you with this stuff too. I need to introduce you to your librarian if you don't already know him or her. I don't know who that is, but I'll find out and we'll talk about that later. So as a student, I know I'm going to have some reading. Then I've got an assignment to do, and when I click on the assignment, I can submit it once I'm done. I don't know where you actually had your directions for each assignment. I didn't dig into your Moodle page that deeply, but you want to make sure that you have very specific directions. Some students love rubrics too. It gives them an opportunity to really understand before they begin the assignment, to really understand what it is you're looking for. And then of course your discussion. So We call it RAD. We call it Reading, Assignments, and Discussion. It's the basics for any online course. What we try to do is include other resources, as I said, just to make it a little more interesting. Do you have to have an assignment every week? Well, no, of course not. But you are going to want to figure out how to make sure your students are interacting with you every week. So if you don't have a discussion each week, you should certainly have an assignment, or vice versa. And there is absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, it's probably more standard and more of a best practice to have both in each week. Okay. I also have a document. It was put together by the University of Misericordia. It's actually kind of a reference document that will help you to see how online activities compare to face-to-face activities as far as face time goes with a professor. Because, of course, if you're doing a 3-credit course, you're expected to have so much 48 hours of actual interaction between you as the faculty and the student. And, obviously that interaction takes a different form in an online course, and this spreadsheet kind of helps you work through that. I'm nearing the end here, so I've now gone to week 2, and you'll see that it's laid out pretty much the same as what you just saw. Readings, assignments, discussion. You go to week 3, same thing. And, of course, you'll notice that some weeks have more things to read, some have less. I like this approach here. All responses are due in the action forum below by Monday. Fill in the date, and by 8 p.m. if that's the time that you decided that discussion forums are due. You could actually put this line under the discussion forum, but I just left it the way it is, and there's no reason that you couldn't put it here and there. That might it doesn't hurt to be repetitive and reinforce what you're asking. So I think you probably get it now. We go to week 4, and we have sort of the same thing, and week 5. You'll also notice in each one of these sections that I've indented each link within that section just to make it a little more obvious how it's laid out. So there you have it. That's one potential template. Becky Casper, our Center for Teaching Excellence director, has another way of laying out courses that I'm going to offer that as an alternative to this as well. But this should hopefully get you going, and we don't have to conform exactly to this layout. But what I would really recommend is that we settle on a layout and be consistent. Now, maybe one of your courses has the equivalent of labs or a practicum involved. So if that's the case and there's separate activities there that are unique compared to these other courses, then fine. You add another one under discussion that says lab activities or something. The point is it can be flexible, but it also needs to have some familiarity for students so they can focus on what you're saying as the instructor rather than trying to familiarize themselves with a new environment every time a new course starts.